So I'm presenting my learning module, which is related to a project for my students, which asks them to consider how we can make an impact on various global problems. I launched all of the content for my course on our learning management system, which is PowerSchool Unified Classroom. I selected this platform because it's what my students are most familiar with. It's where content is posted for all of their classes. So what I did was I created a page on my class page completely dedicated to this project where students would be able to access all content throughout the duration of the project. So we started off, of course, trying to think about topics that were important to us. This was a springboard off of the novel Refugee, written by Alan Gratz. But then students started thinking in small groups, collaborating about different problems that are existing all over the world right now. So once students came up with a topic they were interested in, we started off by looking at this project organizer. It was really important for me to make sure that students had access to all the project requirements from day one so that they could set goals and plan ahead. They also had a choice as to whether or not they wanted to work individually or with a group. Initially, I had selected a color scheme of red and blue, but after doing further research in this course, I realized that that was not the best choice due to students who might be colorblind or have visual impairment. So I changed that to blue and yellow to hopefully meet the needs of students who might be visually impaired or colorblind. So as you can see on this page, there are a series of questions that the students need to answer, thinking about the goal they selected, who the problem impacts, where the problem is presented, why it's important, 5 interesting facts, and finally, the consequences if things don't change, and then an action plan. So I really wanted to get the students thinking, what can we do to make an impact on this global problem? I also included their specific research requirements so they could see what they would need to do. Newsela is a key curriculum component in my class, so they were required to read a certain number of Newsela articles, but then from there they had a lot of different choices in which I would guide them to finding another article, looking at 2 video sources, and then they had an option to either listen to a podcast, find an infographic, interview an expert through email, a video conference, or Flipgrid, or they could possibly choose another option. Some students decided to create their own surveys for research, so there were a lot of different choices that the students had throughout the course of the project. I also did share with them from day one their options for presentation methods. So since this project will be shared with an authentic audience outside of our classroom, one thing that is key and crucial for me is that they do somehow incorporate their voice into their presentation, which could be done simply through screencasting like Screencast-O-Matic. I know there are other screencasting tools out there, but I just know that's one that works very well with the devices that my students have access to. So they could create a PowerPoint, a Sway presentation, a web page, an infographic, and then narrate it using Screencast-O-Matic. So lots of choices just in that option alone. The other option they have would be to make some sort of movie or broadcast sharing their research. So they'll be able to use iMovie, Windows Movie Maker, Adobe Spark, or another video creation tool. And then finally, I'm going to suggest that maybe some students create a podcast. A lot of my students found some podcasts that were really interesting to them, so they can create their own podcast. And there's actually a contest going on right now with NPR that will allow students to submit their podcasts to possibly be broadcast live. So I think that'll be a really awesome incentive for them, maybe motivating to possibly win that contest. Right now we're finishing up research, and I did schedule for my school's technology trainer to come in and help them when we get to this creation step. And when that happens, I will be then posting screencasts and tutorials to help them along the way. But since she's coming in and she's really the expert, I'm going to rely on her for some of those tools. So that's their main project overview. Like I said, they had access from the start. They also had access to their rubric from the start, and I think it's really important that, anytime you're giving a student an assignment, they can access and see, what they're required to complete. I encouraged my students to use this as a live document and a working checklist where they could check off each step along the way. To really just make sure that they have everything they need completed. They can use highlighting, they could use check boxes, or they could use a printed version as well. I also did offer students a printed version of the research organizer that we looked at a moment ago. Students have also been encouraged to record their research along the way so that they're building their works cited page as we go. So this is a document that I created, and the students can input each source, their source type, and a live link. That way they can go back and access that content if needed. I also did offer them a printed version if they would prefer to handwrite their works cited and sources. The thing that has been nice, though, for the students who selected the digital options for their project organizer and their research organizer is, of course, the fact that they could share those documents electronically and collaborate that way. Some students were working on their own, some students were working in groups, so they had a lot of options there. Each week, I did post an activity list for the students to work through, which again gave them a lot of different options for how they wanted to spend their time. I really think it's important to consider, the importance of executive functioning and teaching some of our students that from a young age. So they do have this option to check off each task as it's completed or highlight it. Live links are there in each activity list. So here they could watch a video definition of sustainability. Here they could check out the Sustainable Development Goals website. Some students were interested in exploring the refugee crisis, so there was a multimedia text that they could access. These were things, again, that they could go back to throughout each week of the project. During week 2, I really tried to encourage the students to collaborate some more. So we used Teams, and they back-channeled and responded to a video clip there. Of course, formative assessment is a really important part of any classroom. So after they selected their goal this week, I did ask them to complete a Google form. If they needed to go back to access content before doing so, they were able to. I encouraged them to use Newsela as a search engine, and I did a mini lesson to show them how they could save articles. And I also used Socrative to kind of assess their learning and see what were they learning, were they able to find some interesting facts or topics. And then if students were not, the next week I formed small groups to kind of help and target their research. During weeks 3 and 4, this is where they started to branch out from Newsela and share some resources. So I gave them options. I gave them links to some reliable sources and videos on TED-Ed, Nat Geo, the Sustainable Development Goals playlist. We talked in week 3 about using podcasts and infographics for research. So I led a small group mini lesson and put links to sites that they could use. There's also a really awesome site called ListenWise that they could sign up for. And the other thing that I do want to point out is that I was sharing with them the option for accessibility each week in that they could listen to the directions using the immersive reader tool. So that was something I did point out to them, and I later created a screencast taking them through that. During week 4, we talked about creating surveys or using Flipgrid to ask questions and use research. And in my classroom, I use something called the Help Center. So if students needed help, they could reach out to me that way by just simply writing their name on the board. So here's a screencast I created about Google. About creating forms on Microsoft. The students were able to go back and watch that if they needed to. The students were able to access the Flipgrid by clicking here. So they could then go in and securely sign in using their email address and then check out some videos, post some videos, ask each other some questions, and respond to one another that way. Students, as they completed their surveys, they were able to post them on their own and get some feedback from their classmates. So I really try to teach my students a lot of things through this project, and we're wrapping up our research, but like I said, when we get back from winter break, they'll be taking that research and selecting one of those options to use their voice to share what they've learned. I will continue to upload screencasts and other resources that they can go back to, but my goal was for the students to really learn different strategies for research, be able to try new things, be able to find things that work for them to help them understand the impact that we can have on a global problem. And I think it will really increase engagement for them to know that their research, their projects, their hard work is being shared with an audience outside of our classroom. And as you can see, lots of different technology tools were implemented, such as videos, screencasts, forms, Socrative, Padlet, Flipgrid. So lots of different options for the students to share what they've learned and hopefully find new tools that they can use in other classes. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you maybe learned something from my learning module that you could take away and bring to your own classroom.